Hi everyone. So, principle 2 of effective communication for conflict resolution, taken from my book, A Guide to Effective Communication for Conflict Resolution: How Mindful Communication Supports Growth Through Conflict. So, I've already done principle 1, that we treat each other with respect, which you can see on YouTube. I'll probably put a link below. Principle 2, that we don't interrupt one another. So there's a chapter on this because, as with many of the principles are what we apply to ourselves. We may want other people to practice them, but they're not rules for other people, as I'll explain more when we get to principle 9. They're for us to apply to ourselves, and on the face of them, most of them might sound pretty straightforward and obvious, but the question is, do we actually all practice them? And are we surprised if we don't practice them, but then for whatever reason we don't manage to resolve the difficulties that we're experiencing with people? So this principle that we don't interrupt one another, well, a lot of people are going to say, well, that's pretty obvious, but to what extent do we actually practice that? Because there's a lot that underlies the principle that we don't interrupt one another. So obviously, for a start, if you're speaking and I interrupt you, I'm not listening to you. I'm not really treating you with respect, because I'm not allowing you space to be heard. So one of the benefits of not interrupting one another is that we enable people to feel comfortable with us sharing their thoughts and feelings about a particular issue, because we're giving space to them. But to what extent are we able to actually do that? One of the other benefits of not interrupting one another is that if I'm committed to not interrupting someone else, I don't have to kind of hold loads of stuff in my head. I can just relax and listen to what the person that I'm with has to say, without any feeling that I need to kind of jump in with my thoughts or my viewpoints about what they're saying. I can listen to all of what they've said, and then I'm much more likely to have a clearer understanding of their viewpoint, so that then if I do respond to them, what I'm saying is going to be much more informed and connected to, and understanding of their perspective. Whereas if I jump in after 5 words, I don't even know what I'm responding to. I'm making a lot of assumptions about what the person thinks. The other thing that is talked about in the chapter in the book on this is that sometimes what we think is listening is actually still interrupting. So, strangely, in my view, it's often suggested that nodding and giving eye contact to someone when they're speaking is listening. Well, really, when you think about it, it doesn't make any difference to whether you're listening or not. And if I'm focused on, am I nodding and am I giving eye contact while I'm listening to someone, I'm actually still not listening to them, because I'm more focused on these physical, non-verbal things that I'm doing, non-verbal behaviours that I'm doing, than whether I'm actually listening to what the person's saying. And sometimes, in a lot of situations about communication, it's even suggested we should worry about whether we're sitting with an open posture, or whether we've got our arms folded, or whether we're talking with the right tone of voice. And all the time we're thinking about that, we're not listening to people. So really, if we're going to listen, the most important thing is, are our ears tuned into what the person's saying? That's the only consideration we need to have when we're listening to people, is, are our ears tuned into what the person's saying, rather than, are my feet in the right place, am I breathing properly, does my tone of voice sound right, am I nodding, am I smiling, am I giving eye contact? All of this stuff distracts us from listening. So we're actually still interrupting people when we're concerning ourselves more with that than whether we're actually listening. And the way that people will know that we've listened is not whether afterwards they can say, oh yes, the person was nodding and smiling at me while they were talking, so that must mean they're listening. What will tell them that we've listened to them is if we can say back to them what they've said. And when we train mediators, we ask them to be very specifically focused on saying back to people what they've said in their words, because then it's absolutely clear that the person who's speaking has been heard and been listened to. And the benefit in terms of mediation practice is that actually that person then gets a chance to kind of hear themselves and reflect on what they're saying and how they're saying things. But if we don't say anything back to people afterwards, then they don't know whether they've been heard or not. It's a false assumption to think that just because we've sat and nodded and smiled at someone that they're going to feel heard afterwards, or even that if we've sat with a nice open posture, whatever that actually means, that they're going to feel heard. The only way people are going to feel heard is if they hear back in what we say to them afterwards, if not mainly what they've said, then certainly words that they've used, so that they know that we've taken on board the things that they've said. And it can be interesting sometimes to look at conversations, particularly perhaps on the media, on television, but it doesn't have to be. It can be on the bus, sitting on the bus listening to people, or I gave away I'm a little bit nosy sometimes there, didn't I? But sometimes, if you listen to conversations, they're not actually communication. They're just two parallel streams of sound that don't connect, because people are just continuously interrupting. We are as well. When I say people, I know that I do it as well sometimes, but when I'm needing to be very mindful of my communication, I have to focus on whether I am actually listening to the person, whether I can say back to them what they've said to me, or whether, as I say, I am focused on something else, like what I'm going to say in response, or my assumptions about them, or other things that are distracting me from actually genuinely taking on board what the person said. And in difficult situations where there's a conflict that has arisen, it's particularly important that we're mindful of these things, which is why I talk about mindful communication. Other times maybe we don't want to have to be that focused, but when we're involved in a difficult conversation, or we're genuinely wanting to show someone that they're being listened to and we're wanting to support them in talking things through, it's important that we consider these things, because otherwise we will interrupt people even if we're not actually speaking over them. We'll be interrupting them with our own thinking and our own preoccupations with other things. And so the only way that they will know that we've heard them is if we can say back to them what they've said to us. And if we're going to be able to achieve that, we've got to be very present with what the person is saying. So that's kind of a taster of some of the things that are in the second chapter, which talk about Principle 2 in the book. I wanted to also mention just a little activity which is really, really useful to promote effective communication between two people. Actually, I guess when I think about it, you could probably do it with more than two people, but it's usually done with two people. And it's called co-listening. And co-listening is a great way of ensuring that there's been effective communication created between two people, and it very much relies on the idea that we don't interrupt one another. So co-listening could happen between maybe two partners in a relationship who maybe don't find time to talk to each other about their week, about their day, about things that are troubling them. It could be between two work colleagues who want to check in with each other about their respective understandings of an issue or a project at work, but don't often get time to properly sit down and talk to each other. It could be between parents and children, and the beauty of it in that situation is it's a very much an equal listening process. So co-listening, what is it? It's a situation where it's very simple, but the important thing about it is you need to be very disciplined in how you do it. So it's very simple in that one person speaks for, you could put a time limit on it, but it's usually not necessary. But one person speaks without any interruption for what could be 5, maybe 10 minutes. It's rare that people talk without any interruption for 10 minutes, but if you wanted to set a limit, you could do. But maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and the other person just listens. That's all they need to do. They're not expected to give any commentary, they're not expected to give any opinion, but they just listen. And when the person's finished speaking, The listener says back to the person what they've said in their words, in the words of the speaker, as best as they're able. Now, it may not be that any of us are able to remember everything that someone said, but the important thing is we're committed to trying to say back to them as much as we can in the words of the speaker. That's the important thing of the process of co-listening. And it might be that the person only remembers 40% of what the person said, but the important thing is they're just saying back to them what the speaker has said, so they're not giving an opinion about it, they're not asking questions about it, they're not trying to reinterpret it or reframe it, as sometimes people would speak about. There's no reframing. It's in the words of the speaker, just saying back to them what they've said. And then all that then happens is that the two people swap round and do exactly the same thing. Now, the beauty of that is, sometimes people think, well, what's that about? Why would we do it that way? The beauty of that is that it gives people a chance to say what they want to say, and there may be things that are really going on inside them that they can't get their head around, but they're saying them, they're putting them out there, and instead of it just being kind of heard and then the person walks away, the person is saying it back to them. So it's almost like they get a chance to look at themselves. They get a chance to see themselves being reformed in front of them, but in the same way, as close as possible to how it is they said things. And the power of that is that people, first of all, they feel very listened to because they're hearing themselves, so they know the person has been listening. But also it gives you a chance to kind of almost like look in on yourself, and all the things that quite often we can feel very confused by, we're able to kind of stand back from and look at it and hear it. So it's almost like we're able to step outside of ourselves because of the support of the other person who's doing the co-listening with us. And when it's swapped round, obviously the other person gets the same opportunity, the same benefit. But the beauty of it is when you both have a shared interest in something, whether it's your relationship, how your week's going, a problem in your relationship, a work project, is it gives you both also a chance to hear each other's views about things, which probably before you just haven't had the opportunity to do. And it can make a massive difference to your ability to see another person's perspective on things and to understand where they're coming from, but not to feel at any time you've got to do anything about it. You're just valuing and revering their perspective without having to challenge it, without having to give a view about it, without having to fix it if it's a problem for them. You're just hearing that person and giving them that very respectful space in which they can speak. And if you've never tried it, I would just ask you to trust or try it and see the power of it, because it's hard to convey the impact of that without actually you doing it. But if you were to do it, as long as you stick to those important disciplines of not giving an opinion, not asking questions, just saying back to the person what they've said, I think you will find that with anybody who's willing to do it with you, you'll find it a very powerful experience to just be listened to by someone, and also just to listen to that person as well and share each other's perspectives. Very powerful, and particularly if you've got some kind of difficulty or concern with someone. Oops, there am I being interrupted by my telephone. Isn't that interesting? So I recommend you try that. And if it's of interest, then let me know. Oh, isn't that? There. So hopefully that didn't spoil what I was saying, that interruption that I had no control over. So give it a try. Please let me know what you think, and put comments in the section below. And if you're interested, please buy the book. And you'll get more examples of this kind of thing that you can look into with respect to your own communication, particularly if you're experiencing some kind of unresolved conflict. The intention of the book is to help you look at your communication when you're experiencing some kind of unresolved conflict. So thanks very much for listening again. See you in the next video, which will be Principle 3, that we have the right to pass. Bye bye.